Okay, a couple final comments, and then we'll get some of the answers to these, hopefully. Much is made by the intelligent design theorists on irreducible complexity. Systems are so complex, if you took a single part out or took a couple parts out, it wouldn't work. And therefore, how would you get a stepwise Darwinian gradual system where you add this part and add that part and so on, and now you end up with this complex, say, eye or wing or something like that? This is an old argument presented to Darwin even before he published The Origin of Species. He already had the answer in there when it was published. Clever idea. And that's called the problem of incipient stages. So let's take the wing, for example. What good would half a wing do? I can see what good a fully aerodynamic wing would be. What good would half a wing do? Well, this is the problem of exaptation, in which a feature that originally evolved for one purpose is co-opted for a different purpose. The incipient stages in wing evolution had uses other than for aerodynamic flight. Half wings were not poorly developed wings, they were well-developed something else's, perhaps thermoregulating devices. The first feathers in the fossil record, for example, are hair-like and resemble the insulating down of modern bird chicks. Since modern birds probably descended from bipedal theropod dinosaurs, wings with feathers could have been employed for regulating heat. Holding them close to the body would retain heat, stretching them out would release heat. In the Galapagos Islands, I have seen flightless cormorants returning to shore after diving for seafood, upon which they stretch out their stubby little wings with desultory feathers to dry them out and collect heat from the sun. In this case, wings evolved from flight tools to thermoregulating devices. In evolution, structures can be adopted for one function and evolve into use for another function, and may have multiple functions at one time. And then I go on and on about all the different theories and data and experiments with birds, modern birds, paleontologists looking at bird structures and wings, how can they can be used for sort of pushing along the ground, for running, for pushing down to climb trees, for example. For gliding, you don't have to have full aerodynamic flight. In other words, the whole irreducible complexity argument unravels if we just take one step back and say the structures that are being used for this purpose today were not originally used for that purpose. They were used for something else and co-opted later for a different use. And but even if that's completely wrong, mind you, even if the RNA to DNA sequence, that's wrong. The flight explanation for wings, that's wrong. Even if all that's wrong, we still need to keep looking for the answer. And to just invoke the equivalent of the deity or the intelligent designer, what is that going to get us? Nothing, not within the realm of science. So I'm going to end there with what I think is a disturbing well, two, I would like, since we have Dr. Wells with us here, I would like to ask him publicly about one statement that he made, which I find really both disturbing and very unscientific. He apparently is a member of the Unification Church and a follower of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, in which Dr. Wells writes, Fathers, that is the Reverend Moon's words, my studies and my prayers convinced me that I should devote my life to destroying Darwinism, just as many of my fellow unificationists had already devoted their lives to destroying Marxism. When Father chose me, along with about a dozen other seminary graduates, to enter a PhD program in 1978, I welcomed the opportunity to prepare myself for battle. I cannot imagine any other area of science in which somebody would set out to destroy it. What's the purpose of that, unless you have some other agenda? It's perfectly okay to attack somebody's theory because you think your theory is better. But in science, in order to displace the predominant paradigm of the day, it's not enough to just knock holes in it. You have to replace it with something else that not only explains the anomalies that mainstream theory doesn't explain, but it also explains all the facts that the theory does explain. So before you displace it, you have a whole set of things like our explanation for the origins of DNA, the evolution of the eye, the evolution of wings, the entire fossil record. I'd love to know from Dr. Wells, for example, what his explanation is for the fossil sequence. Why is it that we have such an incredibly detailed fossil sequence with dozens now of intermediate fossils within whales, for example, and even more so with hominids? Are we to believe that the intelligent designer did what? Created the first hominid and then evolution took over and took it from Lucy all the way to us? Did the intelligent designer come from wherever he lives and intervene into our world, what, at the genus level? He did the Australopithecines, and he left, and he came back, and he did the hominids, and then he left, and then he came back and did Neanderthal, or wait, maybe he created all the hominids, and evolution created Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and Homo erectus, and, well, so what? I don't know, because they don't have a theory about that. But I'd love to know what that is. In other words, we have a theory. You can go ahead and say, I don't believe it, or I don't accept it. That's fine. And if you go to a conference of paleoanthropologists, this is what they do. I dispute your fossil. I don't think it's a new species. I think it's just a variation of this other species. Fine. That's all part of how science is normally done. But what you can't do is come in and say, I reject the whole thing, and I have no theory to replace it. Well, what are you doing at the conference here then? I mean, this is science. We have to go back and test something, and that's the problem. So I end with a final quote here of why I think Darwin matters, and this has to do with what I think is really going on here, that is the fear that somehow evolutionary theory represents this materialistic worldview of science, and somehow that robs us of our spirituality. What science tells us is that we are but one among hundreds of millions of species that evolved over the course of 3.5 billion years on one tiny planet among many orbiting an ordinary star, itself one of possibly billions of solar systems in an ordinary galaxy that contains hundreds of billions of stars, itself located in a cluster of galaxies not so different from millions of other galaxy clusters, whirling away from one another in an accelerating, expanding cosmic bubble universe that very possibly is only one among a near infinite number of bubble universes. Is it really possible that this entire cosmological multiverse was designed and exists for one tiny subgroup of a single species on one planet in a lone galaxy in that solitary bubble universe? It seems unlikely. Herein lies the spiritual side of science, scientuality, if you'll pardon an awkward neologism, but one that echoes the sensuality of discovery. If religion and spirituality are supposed to generate awe and humility in the face of the Creator, what could be more awesome and humbling than the deep space discovered by Hubble and the cosmologists, and the deep time discovered by Darwin and the evolutionists? Darwin matters because evolution matters. Evolution matters because science matters. And science matters because it is the preeminent story of our age, an epic saga about who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. Thank you.